The stars had once been filled with the sound of human ships. Fleets moved through the darkness, carrying the flags of Earth and her colonies. Humanity had fought hard to claim its place among the stars, and for a time, it seemed nothing could stop them. But power brings fear, and fear brings control. The Galactic Council, led by the alien Varn Dominion, decided that humanity was too dangerous to be trusted. After years of battles and loss, the war came to an end. The humans had fought bravely but were outnumbered and outmatched. The day the Orion Treaty was signed became known as the Day of Submission. Every human leader stood under the cold gaze of alien diplomats as the treaty was read aloud. It was not a peace agreement. It was a chain. The treaty stated that humanity was forbidden to build or own any kind of warship. Their shipyards were to be dismantled, their weapons melted down, and their admirals dismissed. Humanity would be allowed to travel, trade, and live, but never again to fight. Admiral Ethan Cross stood among the human delegates, his hands clenched behind his back. He was a man who had spent his entire life defending humanity's right to survive. Now he had to watch as that right was taken away. When the treaty was signed, he felt something inside him break. He did not speak as the alien council members smiled and congratulated each other. To them, it was just another victory. To him, it was humiliation. When the humans returned to Earth, the streets were silent. The great shipyards that once lit up the night were now dark and empty. Workers had been sent home, their tools taken by alien inspectors. Factories that built engines and armor now made farming machines and cargo containers. Children who once dreamed of becoming starship captains were told to forget such foolish ideas. The human spirit seemed to dim a little more each day. But not everyone accepted this new world. Some whispered in secret meetings that the council had gone too far. They spoke of how the aliens feared humanity's potential, how they wanted to keep them weak. Many were too afraid to say these things aloud. The council's ships still patrolled the skies, and anyone caught breaking the treaty faced severe punishment. Still, quiet anger grew in the hearts of many. Admiral Cross was forced into retirement. He moved to a small home on the coast, far from the cities. But he could not forget the faces of those who had served under him, the young pilots, the engineers, the soldiers who had trusted him. He knew they had not fought and died for nothing. Every night he sat by the window, looking up at the stars. They seemed farther away than ever, as if the universe itself had turned its back on humanity. On Mars, a woman named Dr. Lena Hart worked in an old engineering facility. Before the treaty, she had helped design ship engines. Now she repaired transport shuttles for miners. She missed the excitement of her old job, the thrill of creating something that could fly beyond the planets. Sometimes she would stay late, sketching designs on scraps of paper, ideas for ships she knew she would never be allowed to build. One night, she received a message. It had no sender and no signature, only a few words. "We are not finished yet." In the years that followed, humanity learned to survive under the Council's rule. They traded with other species, mined asteroids, and grew crops on distant moons. Outwardly, they seemed peaceful and obedient. But beneath that calm surface, a quiet determination began to take root. People like Ethan Cross and Lena Hart carried a spark inside them, a belief that one day humanity would rise again. The aliens thought they had ended humanity's ability to fight. They did not understand that humans did not need war to resist. They resisted by surviving, by enduring, by remembering who they were. Across the colonies, people began to tell stories of old battles, of heroes and ships that once flew proudly. Children listened and learned, their eyes bright with curiosity. The aliens could destroy human weapons, but they could not destroy human hope. Years after the signing of the Orion Treaty, a rumor began to spread. It started on the mining stations near Jupiter and moved quietly through the outer colonies. Some said they had seen strange lights in the asteroid belt, ships that did not match any known design. The Council dismissed it as superstition. But those who remembered the war knew better. Something was happening out there in the dark. Admiral Cross received another message one evening. It contained a set of coordinates and a single phrase: "For those who still believe." He looked at the stars one last time before leaving his home. The treaty might have taken away humanity's fleets, but it had not taken their will. The seeds of defiance had been planted, and soon they would grow. Years had passed since the Orion Treaty, and life under the Galactic Council had become quiet and controlled. Humanity had accepted its role as a peaceful species, at least on the surface. Ships carried goods instead of weapons, and space stations served as trade hubs instead of military outposts. But deep within the colonies, a few still carried anger in their hearts. They remembered what it felt like to be strong, to be free, and they refused to let that memory die. Dr. Lena Hart lived on Mars, where the red dust covered everything like a constant reminder of struggle. She was one of the best engineers of her generation, known for her creativity and bold ideas. Before the treaty, she had designed propulsion systems for warships. Now, she repaired mining shuttles and old freighters that barely held together. She worked long hours in a small hangar on the outskirts of the Mars trade colony, where the machines groaned and hissed under her touch. Most days, her co-workers talked about family or new trade routes, but Lena always seemed lost in her own thoughts. At night, when the hangar was empty and the lights dimmed, Lena stayed behind. She would sit at her workbench, sketching designs on scraps of metal and paper. They were ship plans, not for cargo vessels but for something faster, stronger. She knew it was dangerous, but she couldn't help herself. Building ships was what she loved. It was what she was born to do. Sometimes, she wondered if anyone else out there still felt the same way. One evening, while she was working late, her terminal beeped with a new message. There was no sender listed, and the text was short. It read, "Do you still believe in humanity?" She stared at the words, unsure if it was a joke or a trap. The message ended with a set of coordinates in the asteroid belt. She hesitated for a long time before replying with a single word. Yes. 2 weeks later, Lena boarded a small cargo shuttle bound for the outer colonies. She told her co-workers she had taken a contract to repair mining equipment on Ceres Station. In truth, she followed the coordinates from the message. The journey took days, through silent stretches of space where few ships ever traveled. When she finally arrived, she found a hidden docking bay carved into the side of a massive asteroid. There were no markings, no beacons, just a quiet voice on the comms saying, "Welcome home, Dr. Hart." Inside, she found something she never expected. The station was alive with activity. Engineers, pilots, and technicians worked together in secret, surrounded by machinery and half-built ships. At the center of it all stood Admiral Ethan Cross. His hair had gone gray, but his eyes were still sharp. When Lena saw him, she felt both awe and disbelief. The man who had once commanded Earth's fleets was supposed to be retired, living quietly on the coast of Earth. Instead, he was here defying the Galactic Council. "We're building again," Cross said simply. "But this time we build for survival, not glory." Lena followed him through the station as he explained their mission. They called it Project Aegis. The goal was to create a new generation of ships, not just one but many. They would be faster, smarter, and invisible to the Council's sensors. Every piece of metal, every circuit was salvaged or smuggled from different colonies. The operation had been going on for years, slowly, quietly, right under the aliens' noses. Lena listened, amazed. She asked how they could keep such a large project secret. Cross smiled. "Because no one believes humans are brave enough to try again." That night, Lena walked through the construction bay, staring at the half-built frame of a ship. It was rough and unfinished, but she could see the potential in it. She placed her hand on the cold metal and felt a rush of energy. For the first time in years, she felt alive. Over the next few months, Lena became one of the lead engineers of Project Aegis. She designed new propulsion systems using old warship technology, improving them to be faster and more efficient. The team worked in shifts around the clock, hidden from scanners and patrols. They lived with constant fear of discovery, but the thrill of creating something forbidden kept them going. Admiral Cross trained a small group of pilots in secret simulations, using old military data he had saved. Among them was a young man named Daniel Price, a skilled pilot who had grown up hearing stories about the old fleets. He was bold, sometimes reckless, but deeply loyal to humanity. Cross saw something of himself in the boy. As weeks turned into months, the ship began to take shape. They named it the Resolute. It wasn't as large as the old battleships, but it carried a spirit that no alien treaty could destroy. Every bolt and beam represented defiance. Every spark of the welder's torch was a promise that humanity would not stay silent forever. One night, as the ship's engines were tested for the first time, the sound echoed through the metal halls of the station. Lena and Cross stood side by side, watching the power readings rise. The Resolute came alive, humming like a heartbeat. Cross smiled faintly and said, "They thought they ended us, but this is just the beginning." The station lights flickered as the ship powered down, and everyone in the hangar stood still, filled with quiet pride. The spark had been lit. Humanity had taken its first step toward reclaiming the stars. The hidden flame of defiance was no longer just a dream. It was real, and it burned brighter than ever. The Resolute was more than a ship. It was a symbol. Hidden deep within the asteroid belt, the people of Helios Station worked day and night to bring it to life. Every rivet, every wire, every bolt carried the hopes of a species that refused to surrender. The Galactic Council believed humanity had been tamed, but in the darkness, they were learning to roar again. Captain Daniel Price stood on the bridge of the Resolute, staring out at the scattered stars through the reinforced glass. The ship was still under construction, but it already felt alive. He had spent months training under Admiral Ethan Cross, learning every system, every weakness, every secret of the new ship. Price was young, determined, and brave, sometimes to a fault. He had grown up hearing tales of the old fleets and had dreamed of the day humanity would rise again. Now he was standing inside the proof that it could. Dr. Lena Hart walked onto the bridge carrying a datapad, her face lit by the faint blue glow of the screens. "Engines are ready for final testing," she said, her voice calm but filled with pride. "If the systems hold, we can take her on her first flight by next week." Admiral Cross, older but still sharp, nodded. "Make it happen, Doctor. But remember, we're ghosts. The Council must never find us." Everyone on Helios Station knew the risk. If the Varn Dominion or the Galactic Council discovered their hidden base, it would mean death for all of them. The treaty forbade any human from building or commanding a warship. Violating it was an act of rebellion, an act of war. That knowledge hung over every worker, every engineer, every pilot. But the fear didn't stop them. It made them stronger. As the final panels were sealed and systems powered on, the Resolute came alive. Lights blinked across the control deck, and the hum of the engines echoed through the hangar. For the first time in half a century, a human warship was ready to fly. When the day of launch arrived, the crew gathered quietly in the main hangar. There were no cheers, no celebrations, just silent determination. Captain Price stood at attention as Admiral Cross addressed them. "We do this not for revenge," Cross said, his voice echoing off the steel walls. "We do this because we must remember who we are. The Council took our fleets, but not our spirit. Today, the stars will hear humanity's voice again." The Resolute lifted slowly from the hangar floor, its engines glowing bright white. The entire station shook as the ship rose, then glided out into the dark void. For a few moments, everyone inside Helios Station watched in silence, breath held, as the ship disappeared into the blackness. Once clear of the asteroid field, Captain Price gave the order. "Engage main drive. Let's see what she can do." The ship surged forward, breaking through the cold silence of space like a blade through water. Lena monitored the systems from engineering, smiling as the readings stabilized. "Engines are holding steady," she reported. "Power output at 98%. Price leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the stars ahead. "She flies beautifully," he whispered. For hours, they tested the ship systems, engines, shields, communications, and weapon prototypes. Everything worked better than expected. The Resolute was small, but it was fast and deadly. It was built to strike from the shadows, hit hard, and vanish before anyone could respond. But as the test flight came to an end, a warning light flashed across the console. Incoming signal, Lena said. Encrypted Varn frequency. Price froze. The Varn Dominion patrolled this sector. If they detected the Resolute, everything would be lost. Cut power to non-essential systems, Cross ordered over the comms. Make us cold. The Resolute went dark, drifting among the asteroids. Outside, the silence returned. Through the viewport, they saw the faint shimmer of an alien patrol ship passing nearby. The crew held their breath. Minutes felt like hours as the alien ship scanned the area. Then, suddenly, the patrol turned away. The danger had passed. The humans exhaled in relief. That was too close, Lena muttered. Cross's voice came through the comms again, calm but firm. Get used to it, Doctor. We live in the shadows now. When the Resolute returned to Helio Station, the crew was met with quiet applause and relieved smiles. The first test flight was a success, but the experience had reminded them of the risk they carried. One mistake, one signal, and everything would end. That night, as the crew celebrated in the mess hall, Admiral Cross and Lena met privately in the command room. They looked over blueprints of larger ships, cruisers, carriers, dreadnoughts. The Resolute was only the beginning. If we can build one, we can build a fleet, Cross said. His tone was steady, but his eyes burned with determination. Lena nodded. A ghost fleet, she said quietly. One the Council will never see coming. Cross smiled faintly. Exactly. We start tomorrow. And so, under the shadow of the asteroid belt, humanity began its greatest secret project. Ship by ship, part by part, the Ghost Fleet was born. They had been forbidden to build warships, but they would not be stopped. The fire had been lit, and it would soon become a storm that would shake the galaxy. The Ghost Fleet grew slowly but steadily in the dark reaches of space. Each ship was built from scraps and smuggled materials, welded together by hands that refused to bow. Engineers, miners, and pilots all worked together under the command of Admiral Ethan Cross. The Resolute had proven that humanity could still build, still fight, still dream. The aliens had no idea what was taking shape beyond their patrol lines. But secrets have a way of finding light. On Mars, Senator Morgan Hale sat in his office overlooking the Red Plains. He had been one of the architects of the Orion Treaty, a man who believed peace was more important than pride. To him, the treaty was not surrender, but survival. When whispers of a secret fleet reached his ears, he felt both fear and anger. If humanity broke the treaty, the Galactic Council would crush them without mercy. Hale called for a private meeting with an old friend from the Varn Dominion, an alien named Korath. They met under the cover of diplomacy, but their words carried far more weight than trade routes or tariffs. You told me humans had accepted their place, Korath said, his cold eyes narrowing. Hale nodded, uneasy. They have, but there are rumors. Old soldiers who refuse to move on. Engineers building things they shouldn't. I can't confirm anything yet. Korath leaned forward. If what you say is true, then you will tell us where they hide. The Council will not tolerate rebellion. Hale hesitated. They are my people, Korath. I don't want another war. Then stop one before it begins, Korath replied coldly. Do what must be done. The next day, Hale sent a coded message through official channels. He didn't name anyone, but he mentioned unusual activity in the asteroid belt. It was enough. Within a week, a Varn inspection team was dispatched to Mars and nearby colonies. The aliens claimed it was routine, but those who knew the truth felt the air grow colder. On Helio Station, Admiral Cross received word from one of their outer agents. The message was short. Council patrols are coming. Hide everything. The station fell into controlled chaos. Lights dimmed, machinery shut down, and workers began sealing away critical parts. Half-built ships were covered with reflective panels to mask heat signatures. The Resolute was sent into hiding behind a drifting asteroid field. Dr. Lena Hart worked without rest, wiping the station's data systems and rerouting energy signatures. Sweat dripped down her face as alarms echoed through the halls. She knew what would happen if the Varn found them. Not just death, but the end of everything they had built. Hours later, 3 massive alien cruisers appeared outside the asteroid field. Their scanners swept across the rocks, sending out waves of energy that made the lights flicker on Helios Station. Everyone held their breath. Captain Daniel Price, aboard the Resolute, listened in silence from the edge of the system. "If they find us, we fight," he said softly. Cross's voice came through the comms, calm but firm. "Not yet. We fight only if there is no choice." The alien ships drew closer. One of their scanners locked briefly onto the asteroid where the Resolute hid. Price's hands hovered over the controls, ready to move. Then, suddenly, one of the alien cruisers changed course, chasing a false signal Lena had created. It was a perfect decoy. The patrol moved away, scanning empty space. The humans waited in silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, the alien ships turned and left the system. Only then did the crew breathe again. But they were not safe. Later that week, another coded message reached Cross. This one carried a signature he recognized: Senator Hale. The message said only one thing: "I warned them. They will come again." Cross read it twice, then deleted it. He knew what it meant. The Council would not stop with a patrol. They would send an armada. "We need to move," he told Lena. "Helios Station won't stay hidden for long. We'll finish what we can and scatter the rest. The Ghost Fleet will live, even if we have to tear it apart to save it." Lena looked around the hangar at the half-built ships. "We'll never have enough time." Cross placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll make time." Over the next few days, the station prepared for evacuation. Supplies were loaded, data cores encrypted, and smaller vessels sent to other hidden bases across the belt. The Resolute stayed behind to protect the retreat. Captain Price volunteered to lead the defense. When the Varn fleet finally returned, the battle began almost immediately. The Resolute engaged first, darting between asteroids and striking from the shadows. Its railguns tore through alien armor. Its engines outmatched anything the Council had seen from humans in decades. But there were too many enemies. Lena watched from the command center as flashes of light filled the dark sky. She heard the comms crackle with Price's voice, steady but strained. "We've taken damage, Admiral. But they won't get the station. Not while I'm breathing." The Resolute made one final run, drawing the enemy fleet away from Helios Station. The ship vanished into the black, chased by fire and fury. Hours later, the aliens withdrew. Helios Station was damaged but still standing. The Ghost Fleet lived, though the Resolute had gone silent. Admiral Cross stood by the viewport, watching the stars flicker. He knew what Price had done. He had bought them time and hope. "The galaxy knows we're not broken anymore," Cross said quietly. Lena nodded, her eyes wet but resolute. "They wanted to stop us. Now they've only made us stronger." The battle near Helios Station changed everything. Word spread across the human colonies like wildfire. Even though the Galactic Council tried to hide the truth, stories of the Resolute's stand reached miners, traders, and workers on distant worlds. People whispered of a ship that defied the aliens, of humans who had not forgotten how to fight. For the first time in decades, the name of humanity carried strength again. Admiral Ethan Cross knew that the fight was far from over. The Varn Dominion had suffered losses and would soon return with greater force. But the spark had already been lit. All across the colonies, small groups began to rise. Engineers in the belt, smugglers in the outer systems, and even soldiers who had once served under alien supervision now reached out in secret. They wanted to join the cause. Humanity was beginning to remember who it was. Dr. Lena Hart worked without rest, repairing what was left of Helios Station. Many of the younger engineers looked to her for guidance, and she became a quiet leader among them. Her hands were always covered in grease, her clothes stained with dust, but her eyes burned with determination. Every night she thought of Captain Daniel Price and the Resolute. No one knew if he was alive, but his sacrifice had given them time. It had given them purpose. The wreckage of old cargo ships was brought to Helios Station and turned into parts for new vessels. What began as a secret operation now grew into something greater. Cross ordered the construction of new stations hidden across the asteroid belt, each one dedicated to building and arming ships. They no longer built for survival, they built for resistance. On the outer rim, human traders smuggled supplies through alien patrols. They used old mining routes and abandoned jump gates to move cargo unseen. Many of them were not soldiers but ordinary people who had decided that enough was enough. Some paid with their lives when caught, but for each one lost, 2 more took their place. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council began to panic. Reports of missing patrols and destroyed probes spread through their ranks. The humans were no longer silent or weak. The Council held emergency meetings, arguing over how to control the situation. Some demanded another show of force. Others warned that pushing too hard might unite humanity even further. They were right. On Mars, protests broke out. People filled the streets, waving banners and shouting for freedom. The Varn troops stationed there tried to control the crowds, but the humans would not back down. They chanted names like Resolute and Helios as symbols of defiance. The aliens saw it as rebellion. For the humans, it was a promise. Admiral Cross knew they had reached a point of no return. The Ghost Fleet could no longer hide forever. It was time to grow bolder. He gathered his senior officers and engineers in the command chamber. The lights were dim, and the air was thick with tension. "The Council thinks we are scattered," Cross began. "They believe we are few and afraid. They are wrong. Every human world now carries a piece of this rebellion. Every worker, every engineer, every pilot who remembers what we lost. They are with us. We must give them hope, something real to believe in." Lena stepped forward. "Then we build more ships," she said. "We build them faster, smarter. Ships that can fight anywhere, anytime." Cross nodded. "Exactly. From this moment, Project Aegis becomes more than a secret. It becomes our lifeline, our flame." Over the next months, production across the hidden stations increased. New ship designs came to life under Lena's guidance. Sleek vessels that could cloak their heat signatures, carry modular weapons, and move through space like shadows. Each ship bore the name of a lost human city. New York, London, Cairo, Sydney. They were not just machines. They were memorials. Pilots trained in virtual simulations, preparing for battles that had not yet begun. Smugglers became couriers, carrying encrypted messages and supplies between stations. Even scientists on peaceful colonies began to secretly assist, sending research disguised as trade data. Humanity was no longer rebuilding, it was preparing. One evening, as Cross walked through the hangar, he stopped beside a newly completed cruiser. Its hull gleamed under the soft light, engraved with the words for the fallen. Lena joined him, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Do you think they'll come again soon?" she asked. Cross looked at the ship, his expression firm. "They will. But next time we'll be ready." Across the asteroid belt, signals pulsed quietly through the dark. One by one, hidden bases came online, their systems synced to Helios Station. Dozens of new ships powered up, their engines lighting the void with faint blue fire. For the first time in years, humanity had a fleet again. Not as large as before, but united by purpose and bound by defiance. Every hum of an engine, every flicker of light, was a sign that humanity's spirit had not died. It had only been waiting. As the ships took formation for their first coordinated test, Cross stood at the viewport with Lena beside him. The darkness outside seemed to move as the fleet's lights spread across the stars. "This is only the beginning," Cross said quietly. "The flame is burning, and soon the galaxy will feel its heat." 3 years passed since the battle near Helios Station. In that time, the Ghost Fleet became something greater, a force the galaxy could no longer ignore. Hidden in the shadows, humanity had built ships that defied every law of the Orion Treaty. They were faster, stronger, and deadlier than anything the Varn Dominion had ever imagined. The aliens still believed the humans were scattered, still weak. They were wrong. Admiral Ethan Cross stood on the bridge of the Aurora, the first of the new human dreadnoughts. The ship was enormous, built with layers of adaptive armor that shimmered under the starlight. Its weapon systems were powered by hybrid fusion cores, and its engines could outrun any known vessel. Around it drifted the rest of the fleet, 12 warships, each one named after a fallen city of Earth. New York, London, Tokyo, Cairo, Sydney, Paris, and others. Together, they were the Aegis Fleet, the first human armada in 50 years. Dr. Lena Hart stood beside Cross, watching the ships move in perfect formation. Her eyes reflected the glow of the fleet's engines, a light that had not been seen since the days before the treaty. Every ship represented thousands of hours of work, countless risks, and the sacrifices of those who believed humanity deserved more than submission. "They're beautiful," she said softly. Cross nodded. "They're more than that. They're freedom." He turned to his officers. "Send the signal. Let them know we're no longer hiding." Across the fleet, communication lights flashed as encrypted messages were sent to every human colony and outpost. The message was simple and clear: humanity has returned to the stars. The response was overwhelming. Colonies that had lived in silence for decades erupted with celebration. People gathered in streets, watching live transmissions of the new ships gliding through the void. Children pointed at the screens with wide eyes, and elders wept openly. For the first time in generations, humanity was proud again. Meanwhile, in the chambers of the Galactic Council, the news spread like wildfire. Representatives of the Varn Dominion and other alien races demanded answers. Reports confirmed that a fleet of human warships had been detected near the Vega system. The Council declared an emergency session, their voices filled with anger and fear. "They violated the treaty," shouted one delegate. "They were never meant to have ships again," cried another. The Varn representative stood, his voice cold and sharp. "Then we will remind them of their place. Prepare the fleets." Back aboard the Aurora, Admiral Cross watched the reports come in. He knew the Council would respond with force, but he also knew they had no choice now but to stand their ground. "They'll come for us," Lena said quietly. "I know," Cross replied, "but this time we won't run." Captain Daniel Price, who had been rescued months earlier after the loss of the Resolute, stood at attention nearby. His face bore scars from his ordeal, but his spirit was unbroken. When he saw the new fleet, he felt something stir inside him. He had given everything for this cause, and now it was finally real. Cross turned to him. "Captain Price, you'll take command of the New York. I trust you to lead the vanguard." Price saluted. "It's an honor, sir. For humanity." As the Aegis fleet prepared for deployment, the air across the ships was charged with energy. Crews ran final checks, engineers calibrated weapons, and pilots took their positions. For the first time since the treaty, human warships stood ready for battle, not as rebels but as defenders of their species. When the fleet's engines roared to life, the stars seemed to tremble. From the command deck of the Aurora, Cross gave a simple order: "Take us out. Let the galaxy see what we've become." The fleet moved forward in perfect formation, leaving the shadows of the asteroid belt behind. Beacons across the human colonies lit up, marking their passage. Ships that had once been silent traitors now flashed their lights in salute. Humanity's return to the stars was no longer a secret. It was a declaration. As the fleet crossed into open space, Lena looked out at the endless dark ahead. "Do you think they'll listen this time?" she asked. Cross smiled faintly. "They don't have to listen. They just have to see." A broadcast signal went out across the galaxy, transmitted in every known language. Cross's voice was steady, strong, and clear. "We are the descendants of Earth. We have endured your laws, your fear, and your silence. You told us we could not build, that we could not fight. But we did. You told us we had no place among the stars. But the stars belong to everyone who dares to reach them. We are human, and we are here to stay." The message echoed through every channel, reaching every world under the Council's control. The Aegis fleet's image filled the skies of countless planets, their ships glowing like a rising dawn. For the first time in a century, the galaxy remembered what it meant to fear humanity, not because of their weapons but because of their will. And so the first fleet awakened, carrying with it not just the power of technology, but the unbreakable spirit of a people who refused to be forgotten. The stars above Vega burned bright as the Aegis fleet arrived at the edge of the system. Before them lay the silent shimmer of the Vega colonies, once a thriving trade hub, now under the control of the Varn Dominion. Dozens of alien ships patrolled the skies, their hulls marked with the insignia of the Galactic Council. It was here that humanity would make its stand. Admiral Ethan Cross stood on the bridge of the Aurora, his gaze locked on the tactical display. Around him, the crew worked in quiet coordination, the air heavy with anticipation. Every heartbeat felt like the pause before a storm. "Status of the fleet?" Cross asked. "Formation complete, sir," replied Commander Reed, one of the younger officers. "All systems green. The New York and Cairo are in position to flank." Cross nodded. "Then we begin." He opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Admiral Cross. For 50 years we lived in silence. We obeyed their rules, followed their laws, and hid in the shadows. No more. Today humanity speaks with one voice, one they cannot ignore. For Earth, for every world that still remembers what it means to be free, we fight." The bridge erupted in cheers, and across the fleet, captains repeated his words. Engines roared to life and the Aegis fleet surged forward. The Varn forces were quick to respond. Their ships moved in perfect formation, sleek and deadly. Blue plasma fire streaked across the void, lighting up the dark. But the humans were ready. The Aurora's shields flared as energy beams struck, then retaliated with a volley of railgun rounds that tore through the nearest cruiser. On the New York, Captain Daniel Price gripped the command chair tightly. "Target their lead destroyer. Full spread," he ordered. Missiles streaked out, curving through the dark before finding their mark. The explosion lit the sky like a sunrise. Dr. Lena Hart monitored from the science deck aboard the Aurora. Her hands moved quickly over the controls, tracking shield harmonics and enemy movements. "Their ships are adapting, Admiral. They're trying to jam our targeting systems." "Switch to manual targeting," Cross said calmly. "We trained for this." Across the fleet, human pilots took direct control. The battle became faster, more chaotic. Alien ships twisted through space, their plasma fire cutting across the human lines, but the Aegis fleet held firm. Each ship moved like part of a living organism, protecting one another, striking with precision. The Cairo was hit hard, its engines crippled, but instead of retreating, its captain turned the ship directly toward the enemy. "For humanity!" she shouted before ramming her vessel into a Varn battleship. The resulting explosion shook every scanner in the sector. Lena's voice trembled. "They're giving everything they have." Cross's jaw tightened. "So will we." The Aurora pushed forward, its railguns glowing with heat. "Target the flagship," Cross commanded. "Let's end this." The Varn flagship loomed ahead, massive and armored, surrounded by a shield of smaller escort ships. The Aurora's cannons fired again and again, breaking through the enemy line. The flagship's return fire struck hard, shaking the human dreadnought to its core. "Shields at 30%, Reed shouted. "Divert auxiliary power from the engines," Cross ordered. "We're not running." The fleet closed in. The New York swung to the left, the London to the right, forming a spearhead around the Aurora. Together, they unleashed every weapon they had. Torpedoes, lasers, railguns, it was a wall of light and fury. The Varn flagship's shields flickered, then collapsed. A final barrage from the Aurora struck its core, and the ship erupted in a blinding flash. Silence followed. For a moment, it seemed as if even the stars had paused to watch. Then the comm channels filled with cheers. "They're retreating," someone shouted. Across the system, the remaining alien ships began to pull back, their formations broken and chaotic. The humans had done it, they had won. On the bridge, Lena let out a long breath. "We actually did it." Cross looked at the display, watching the enemy signals fade one by one. "No," he said softly. "We've only begun." He opened a new channel, broadcasting across all human frequencies. "This is Admiral Ethan Cross of the United Human Fleet. Vega is free. Let the galaxy know we are done kneeling." As the fleet regrouped, wreckage drifted silently through the void. The cost had been high, but the message was clear. Humanity was no longer a shadow in the galaxy. They had returned, stronger than ever, and the stars themselves would bear witness. From every colony and hidden base, messages of support began to pour in. The flame that had started with a single ship now burned brighter than ever. The humans had won their first major battle, and there was no turning back. Lena stood beside Cross at the viewport, watching Vega's sun rise over the liberated world below. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Cross's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "Now," he said, "the galaxy changes." Weeks passed since the battle for Vega, and the galaxy was no longer the same. The news of humanity's victory spread faster than any fleet could travel. On alien worlds, the Council tried to control the story, calling it an isolated uprising. But the truth could not be buried. Videos of human ships cutting through the Varn forces flooded the networks. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy spoke of humans not as servants or rebels, but as equals, and in some cases as legends. Admiral Ethan Cross stood on the command deck of the Aurora, staring at the stars beyond the viewport. The fleet had suffered losses, but morale was higher than ever. The colonies had united under one banner, the United Human Fleet. Factories that once built mining drones now built starships. Civilian engineers volunteered to work long hours, and scientists poured their brilliance into improving weapons and shields. Humanity had found its purpose again. Dr. Lena Hart sat at her station, reviewing new schematics. Her hair was tied back, her eyes tired but alive with excitement. "The prototypes for the next generation are ready," she said. "Smaller, faster ships with hybrid cores. They'll outmaneuver anything the Varn have." Cross smiled faintly. "We're becoming what they feared we might be." Captain Daniel Price entered the bridge, still bearing scars from the last battle but standing tall. "Recon reports say the Council is amassing fleets near Orion," he said. "They're preparing for an all-out war." Cross nodded slowly. "Then we'll meet them there, but not as the old humanity. This time we go as something new." He turned to the crew. "Prepare the fleet. Every ship, every fighter. Today we stop running. Today we show them what unstoppable really means." The command lights flashed red across the Aurora. One by one, ships aligned in formation, engines flaring blue and gold. The hum of power filled the decks. Across the fleet, captains gave the same order, ready for launch. As the fleet began to move, Lena looked out the viewport. "Do you think we can really win against all of them?" she asked. Cross's expression was calm. "We already did. They just don't know it yet." The Aegis fleet jumped into hyperspace, streaking toward the Orion front. As they emerged, they found the enemy waiting, a massive armada stretching across the stars. The Varn Dominion had called upon every ally they had, determined to crush humanity once and for all. But humanity had learned, adapted, and evolved. The first salvos erupted. Plasma storms lit the void, tearing across the black. The human fleet moved like a single organism, ships darting between fire lines, shields flickering in rhythm. The Aurora led the charge, its cannons blazing with white-hot fury. Lena monitored power levels as the ship shook under fire. "Shields at 60%. Keep them steady," Cross replied. "Focus on the command ship." The New York and Tokyo moved in on the flanks, firing coordinated barrages. Explosions rippled through the enemy formation. Every maneuver, every strike was a message. Humanity was no longer bound by fear. Captain Price led the vanguard, piloting the New York Strait through enemy lines. "For Earth!" he shouted as his ship unleashed its full arsenal. The impact shattered an entire cruiser line, clearing the path for the rest of the fleet. The Varn flagship, a monstrous dreadnought larger than any human ship, loomed ahead. It opened fire with devastating precision, tearing through space. The Aurora took heavy damage, alarms blaring. "Ethan, the core's overheating," Lena warned. Cross steadied himself. "Then let it burn." He turned to his crew. "Charge the main cannon. All power to the forward batteries." Energy surged through the Aurora. The ship glowed like a star being born. For a moment, the entire fleet paused, watching as the flagship gathered its final strike. Cross gave a quiet order. Fire! The beam that erupted from the aurora split the void in two. It tore through the Varn dreadnought's shields and pierced its hull. The explosion that followed lit the Orion system brighter than any sun. When the light faded, the alien flagship was gone. Silence fell across the battlefield. Then, slowly, the alien ships began to scatter. Their formation broke. Their resolve shattered. Across the comms, voices shouted in disbelief and triumph. We did it! They're retreating! The fleet is ours! Cross leaned against the railing, exhausted but smiling. It's over. Lena looked out at the debris field, the stars beyond glowing softly. No, she said, her voice quiet but sure. It's just beginning. Over the following weeks, human ships arrived on liberated worlds, not as conquerors but as allies. Colonies long held under alien control now raised the human banner beside their own. The Galactic Council fractured under the weight of its own lies. One by one, species that had once looked down on humanity now reached out to negotiate. In time, the fleet returned to Helios Station. There, under the rebuilt docks, engineers carved a single phrase into the Aurora's hull. They said we couldn't. We did. As the stars stretched endlessly beyond, humanity stood at the dawn of a new era. They had defied the galaxy, rewritten the rules, and built something the universe could no longer deny. They had become unstoppable.